Last Sunday, we reflected on the image of God as just mercy and merciful justice. We realized that for God, mercy is weightier, more important, more preferable, and more essential than justice. However, in dealing with us, God showed both mercy and justice as inseparable elements of the same reality, namely love, which according to St. Paul is the fulfilling of the law. Without mercy, we learned that justice is punitive and vindictive. But with mercy, justice is corrective and restorative. Similarly, without justice, we saw that mercy is simply being nice and polite. In other words, it is being superficial. Yet, with justice, mercy is graciousness or a generous and benevolent gesture of compassion and concern for the good and well-being of others. This Sunday we exalt the cross, the wood that becomes the means of our salvation, forgiveness from sins, freedom from death, new beginning, renewal, reconciliation, and peace. The cross, without exaggeration, is truly the ultimate embodiment of God's mercy and justice, and of Jesus' love and obedience. The cross, as a sign of contradiction, decisively brings home the message of love beyond all telling. Indeed, a love that cannot be defined by words, but rather can only be penetrated and experienced by a heart that knows gratitude and joy. Today's feast honors the cross not for its violence and death-dealing nature, but for its love and life-giving significance. According to the author of the book of Numbers, this cross is the poisonous serpent which Moses, in accord with Yahweh's instruction, had made and set on a pole. The grumbling and complaining people were beaten and nibbled by serpents because they gave in to impatience and despair. As a consequence, many of them died. In view of the death of others, the surviving group realized that they had wronged God by saying unkind and nasty words to Moses, who represented God in their midst. Thus, when they approached and pleaded for Moses' intercession, God, in his usual goodness, swiftly ordered Moses to erect a pole on which a poisonous serpent was hanged, so that everyone who looked at it would regain life. This is a classic example of the contradiction of the cross. On the negative side, it is the poisonous serpent that bit and killed. And on the positive side, it is the same poisonous serpent that brought healing and life. Indeed, it alters dramatically the notion of the meaning of the old expression. To see God is to die. The poisonous serpent hung on the pole represents God, and to see God is to find life. Our grumbling and complaining against God are blocking the eyes of our faith to see God, and that to us means death. Not to see God is not to receive the needed food for life. When we grumbled and complained, we allow negativities to take hold of our spirits. Hence, in the midst of good times and bad times, we cannot see goodness and experience love anymore, because our spirits and our hearts are no longer attuned and in sync with God's beauty, goodness, and truth revealed by creation that is surrounding us. St. Paul in the second reading exalted the cross by offering this beautiful messianic hymn. For Paul, the whole life of the Son of God, from his incarnation to death on the cross, and to his resurrection and exaltation, is a definitive act of a loving self-emptying. By giving up his heavenly stature, Jesus had already begun carrying the cross of limitation as a human being. That initial cross had intensified when he in total humility obeyed the will of the Father and carried it out to the end without grumbling or complaining. Indeed, he walked through life and through the road to Calvary like a meek lamb about to be slaughtered without any word of defense or blame. In doing so, Jesus contradicted the attitude of the people in the first reading. Those people grumbled and complained as they walked toward the land of overflowing milk and honey. But Jesus remained quiet and meek, knowing fully well that he was walking not toward life, but to death for the crimes and sins that were not his. However, Jesus' own death as a consequence of our personal and social crimes and sins had turned out to be for us the fountain of new life, forgiveness, fellowship, and peace with God and with one another. This has become like this because God was gracious to us. Despite of our sinfulness, he treats us with mercy and justice, not with justice alone, but with a merciful justice and a just mercy. Otherwise, God would not give up his only begotten Son and leave us alone to rot and to decompose in our sins. Therefore, with Pope Francis today, we celebrate the gospel, which is so very radiant with the glory of Christ's cross, constantly inviting us to rejoice. Truly, the cross of Christ is worth exalting, praising, and adoring because it encompasses the love that knows no bounds and which cannot be exhausted by human calculations. When Jesus was hanging and dying on the cross, every word that came out from his lips were words of love. Already worn out by the scourging and carrying of the cross, Jesus, full of love, pleaded for us, his executors. Having mustered enough energy, Jesus exclaimed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Jesus, the dying man, true to his promises, acts as our paraclete, advocate, and defense lawyer before the court of the Father's mercy and justice. To the penitent criminal, in response to the former's appeal, Jesus said, "Truly, today you will be with me in paradise." By these words, Jesus showed the magnanimity of his kindness and generosity. Indeed, he was not bitter. Indeed, he was only gracious till the end. Not wanting to leave us orphans, Jesus, before breathing his last, secures us with a new family. Hence, to his mother and beloved disciple, Jesus declared, "Woman, here is your son. Son, here is your mother." Finally, as he was about to finish the mission of loving us to the end, to the Father who seemed to have abandoned him, he in turn abandons his spirit. "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." From the cross, Jesus speaks only of love, forgiveness, understanding, and generosity. Not once that he complained, blamed the Father or the crowd and their leaders. Instead, Jesus expresses only ownership, responsibility, and accountability to the Father, whom he promised obedience and loyalty. Unlike Jesus, when we found ourselves nailed and hanged on the cross of sufferings, which oftentimes were the result of our own making, we complained and grumbled. We accused and blamed others instead of taking responsibility. Friends, it is time to learn the way of Jesus in carrying our daily crosses, so that they will become redemptive and transformative, life-giving, and relationship enriching. Today we exalt the cross. It is my prayer and hope that every time we make the sign of the cross, we remember what it truly means. The cross is not just a sign. Rather, it is a sign richly embedded with meaning. When we make the sign of the cross, we are signifying that, like Jesus, we will be humble and meek, loving and forgiving to all, and merciful and just toward God and others as ourselves. A married man was caught having an affair with 3 different women. When confronted by his wife, the man raised his voice to intimidate his wife, after which he blamed those women for seducing him. And then, he also blamed his wife for not so romantic with him. This man is an example of how the cross of Christ carries no effect in his life. Up to this date, he remained self-righteous, bragged about his sex appeal, and showed no remorse or sorrow for what he had done. As he continues doing this monkey business, he nailed Jesus on the cross all over again. Indeed, the innocent Jesus, who is present in his wife and children, is victimized all over again. But with the love, mercy, and justice of God, he will realize his sins and accept the power of the cross to renew and make him a better man. As for us, let us experience the glory of the cross and share them to others so that they may feel God's love in their lives.